Hello, grade 8 students. We are going to start activity 1, food and its constituents. Classes of sugar. Monosaccharides, simple sugar that don't need digestion. They are made of one sugar unit or molecule like glucose, fructose, and galactose. Disaccharides, double sugar that need digestion. They are made of two sugar units, di-2, like lactose, sugar in milk. It is made up of two sugar units, glucose and galactose. Maltose, sugar in bread. It is made up of two units of glucose. Complex sugar that need digestion. They are made of many units of sugar molecules, like starch, long chain of glucose. Cellulose, it is found in cucumber and lettuce. Kinds of sugar. Reducing sugar, sugar that give positive result with Fehling test, presence of brick red precipitate. When brick red precipitate is formed after heating a test tube containing the tested food and Fehling test, this indicates that this food contains reducing sugar, like monosaccharides that are glucose, galactose, and fructose. Lactose is a reducing sugar and also maltose. Non-reducing sugar, sugar that give negative result with Fehling test, absence of brick red precipitate. Non-reducing sugar like sucrose and polysaccharides. Identification of water. After heating a piece of bread in a test tube, water droplets appears on the walls of the test tube. This indicates that bread contains water. In order to identify the presence of water in any food, heat a piece of bread or any kind of food in a test tube. If drops of water appears on the walls of the tube, this indicates the presence of water. Identification of starch. Iodine water is an orange-brown liquid. It turns into dark blue color in presence of starch. After adding iodine water to a slice of bread, blue color appears or dark blue color appears. This indicates that bread contains starch. To identify the presence of starch, use iodine water. Add few drops of iodine water on the tested food. If the color turns into dark blue, so starch is present and this is a positive result. And if the color remains brown-orange, so starch is absent and this is a negative result. Identification of reducing sugar. After heating a test tube containing bread filtrate and Fehling solution, brick red precipitate is formed. This indicates that bread contains reducing sugar. To identify the presence of reducing sugar, make Fehling test. Add few drops of Fehling blue solution to the tested food and then heat it. If red brick precipitate is formed, this indicates the presence of reducing sugar. Identification of proteins and or polypeptides. After performing Biuret test to a piece of bread, violet color appears. This indicates that bread contains proteins. In order to identify the presence of proteins and or polypeptides, make Biuret test. If violet color appears, then this indicates that the food contains proteins and or polypeptides. Identification of proteins. Biuret test is performed to indicate the presence of proteins or polypeptides or proteins and polypeptides together. Here, this test is done to identify the presence of proteins. Heat a test tube containing egg albumin. coagulation appears or the albumin is coagulated. This indicates that the albumin contains proteins. To identify the presence of proteins, this test is called coagulation test. Heat the tested food till boiling or add few drops of hydrochloric acid. If coagulation appears, a positive result, then the tested food contains proteins. Identification of salts. After adding silver nitrate to a test tube containing bread filtrate, white precipitate is formed. This indicates that bread contains salts. In order to identify the presence of salts, add distilled water to a piece of bread in a tube, shake, then add silver nitrate to the tube. If a white precipitate appears, this indicates the presence of salts. Identification of lipids. After adding Sudan 3 to a test tube containing oil, red color appears. This indicates that oil contains lipids. In order to identify the presence of lipids, add few drops of Sudan 3. If a red color appears, this indicates the presence of lipids. Another test to identify the presence of lipids. Rub a piece of tested food on a paper. If a translucent spot appears, this indicates the presence of lipids, like butter and oil. As a result, we conclude that bread is a complex food. It contains water, mineral salts, it contains also proteins, lipids, starch, and sugar. Thank you.